Hey, good morning, everybody. I'd like to go ahead and welcome everybody to the Marin Municipal Water District's Watershed Committee and Special Board Meeting of the 21st of March, 2024. Terry, could I please have a roll call?
Yes, good morning. President Ranjiv Kush,
Here.
Director Larry Russell, absent. Director Jed Smith,
Here.
Vice Chair Monty Schmidt.
Here.
And Chair Matt Sand.
Here. Do we have any comments on the agenda today?
I'm here too.
Thank you. No, there are none.
Great. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Schmidt,
Aye.
and Chair Sampson.
Yes. Next up, public comments on items that are not on the agenda.
There are none.
Great, excellent. We'll go ahead and move to our first regular item, and that's the adoption of the minutes of the Watershed Committee from 12 December 2023 and 29 February 2024. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Any public comment?
Not on the minutes.
Great.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Schmidt,
Aye.
Chair Sampson.
Yes. Next up, item number B, our one-time MOU strategic plan and work plan. Sean.
Good morning, board members. I'm Sean Horn, Director of Watershed Resources, and then I'll introduce Claire Mooney from the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy. We're going to present to you today the one-TAM MOU strategic plan and work plan. Pretty big step in the partnership in that this was last done 10 years ago. And so this is a renewing of that MOU process. And then over the last year, the steering committee, executive committee, and various work groups have been developing the strategic plan and also developing a work plan to support that for the next year. So to begin, we've got a presentation that I'll hand it over to Claire to walk us through to give you kind of the context of the planning work that's going on in the partnership and what we've completed over this last year.
Good morning. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Claire Mooney. I do work with the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, where I serve as our Vice President for Park Projects and Conservation. And part of my role there is to support facilitation of the one-TAM partnership. We're so pleased to be at this moment to be with you here today to think about signature of the one-TAM MOU so that we can do another 10 years of work together. So hopefully one-TAM isn't too new to anybody, but for those of you that need a refresher, it is made up of the 4 land management agencies that steward lands on Mount Tam, including Marin Water, the National Park Service, California State Parks, Marin County Parks, with the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy serving as the nonprofit backbone partner. Together, we come together to create a work plan and then implement that work plan. These are the 6 primary areas in which we come together to do cross-collaborative work. That ranges from landscape scale science and management on the mountain to capital projects, visitor and youth programs, focus on partnership and collective impact to continue to increase our impact, philanthropy and investment to bring more resources to the mountain and to our work, and then to communicate and engage the community in that work. Just a few highlights of the things that we've gotten done in our first 10 years together. Again, this is just a smattering of things. It's by no means comprehensive, the work we've done, but I think it speaks nicely to the diversity of work that we've done and the things that we've been able to bring to Mount Tam. So through one-TAM, we launched 2 new high school programs that bring students to the mountain and help them develop leadership skills. We've completed a county-wide vegetation map and forest resilience strategy, which I think you're all quite familiar with, that really served as foundational to helping us advance more forest work. We've documented and shared best practices towards collective impact, and one-TAM now is seen as a national model for how we can come together and think about doing cross-jurisdictional work, leveraging agency resources with a nonprofit partner. And we continue to represent in different forums nationally and even internationally in how we can leverage that work. We are going to be breaking ground at Roy's Redwoods, one of the first capital projects that one-TAM will undertake, an important restoration effort within that watershed. We've established a mountain-wide response to invasive species that also now serves as a statewide model, and all state parks are trained on this model and are using it. We've developed a method for measuring and tracking the health of the mountain through our peak health initiative so that we can really understand where are data gaps, how can we best leverage science towards action, and how can we collectively use our data to make decisions. And then throughout, we've continued to engage the community in mountain-wide scientific inventories and studies so that they understand how we're making decisions, what data we need to do that, and have a deeper sense of connection to place. We will celebrate our 10th anniversary in 2024. So much of 2023, we spent focusing on renewal of our partnership. We knew we wanted to have a 10-year MOU in place to guide our work between 2024 and 2034, which was really led by the executive committee of OneTAM. We created a new strategic plan that would guide our work for 5 years, which is really led by the steering committee of OneTAM, and then a 2-year work plan that we then utilize working groups to implement, whether it's through our science working group or through our programs working group. They have clear direction then from the executive and steering committee on what we want to work on together. We took about a year to implement this work over 2023. We saw this as a great opportunity to reflect on what did we think we'd done really well and what we were most proud of? Where did we continue to see challenges? Where did we want to seek efficiencies? What opportunities did we see on the horizon that we wanted to be well positioned for? So we undertook a 9-month strategic planning process where we did ask ourselves some big questions and spent about 3 months thinking about how those shaped choices that we needed to make to be effective, and then 3 months ensuring that we had made the right decisions to be able to be successful over that 2-year work plan, 5-year strategy, and 10-year MOU. Some of the highlights I just thought would be important to call out as I think about those conversations and decisions made. We did have some great conversations and decided to maintain our focus on the mountain itself while also recognizing that some of our work has greater impact or is it appropriate to do at the county scale. I think the countywide veg map is a great example of that, of being able to more readily scale up to the county scale gave us a great tool that we could share with a broader array of partners and was fairly relatively easy to scale up once we were already doing at the mountain scale. We want to continue to focus on work best accomplished in partnership, and we really had some great conversations about what really served and benefited by us doing it together versus just adding one capacity to 1 or 2 agencies, and how by thinking about that partnership lens do we deepen our impact with a more focused portfolio of work. So what was our really best work that we wanted to make sure we had the resources and bandwidth to do well, and what was work we were ready to let go of. We want to continue to diversify and strengthen our philanthropic approach. We've built a great community of supporters through OneTAM, whether it's through our membership program or through our major giving program, through grants and philanthropic foundation giving. And we see a lot of opportunities, again, to continue to broaden that and really strengthen that over the next 10 years. We want to continue to ensure effective governance and make sure that when we come together, we are being really clear and effective in our decision-making and how we work with our different agencies, and that through our committee structure, we have a clear sense of communication channels, decision-making channels, and we can readily make decisions or changes needed. And then we want to continue to think about fostering emerging partnerships with Point Reyes National Seashore and the Federated Indians of Grant and Rancheria. Both have been engaged with aspects of OneTAM, and while they're not signatory partners, we do see opportunities to leverage their technical expertise, their stewardship lens, their talented staff to continue to advance our work over the next 10 years.
Claire. So we thought as part of the presentation and giving you context for the MOU and what we're asking the board to consider signing and moving forward with is to kind of ground it in how has this partnership really supported Marin Water's work directly. And so I kind of ran around Sky Oaks yesterday on the Watershed and asked everyone, like, what's your biggest lift that comes from OneTAM to get folks? And it was surprising. The one that came out the quickest from everyone was the staff convening amongst the various agencies. So, right, you can think of our botanists becoming, collaborators with state parks botanists and national parks, and what they can do when they start thinking cross-jurisdictionally about stewardship on these lands. And they had some really great examples of how managing invasive plants on state parks protects the watershed's property from invasive plants, and having that conversation is really meaningful. The other one that came up was just collaborative stewardship of the mountain coming through the early detection rapid response as being an incredible support arm to the district. That program is helping us survey our roads and our trails for invasive plants and is really a mitigating activity for how people visit the mountain. And we know people can be vectors, and this is a strategy for ensuring that we don't have an impact on those lands. The Watershed Ambassador program that we do on the watershed for our foothill yellow-legged frog, as well as some of the outreach work that we've done around forest health, has come from our partnership with OneTam and some of the technical expertise they come with in terms of engagement and developing some of the signage on the watershed that helps educate the community about the resources that are there. We've gotten a lift from them on our Azalea Hill signage, kind of telling the story around the restoration and the social trail decommissioning and how that's benefiting the environment. And then also thinking more broadly and long-term about how we implement our BIFIP under this OneTam Forest Health strategy, really giving us a deep understanding of the kind of condition of our forests and what we can do to address some of the impacts and stressors that we're seeing on those lands. And then really teeing us up for some really significant grants that we've been able to get because of this partnership. When we go forward with our grant applications, one of the responses we get from these agencies very quickly in the review is that collaborative approach to regional and working at scale is really key to why they funded us over and over. So CAL FIRE Forest Health Program was a big funder a couple of years ago. The Coastal Conservancy helped us develop that TAM Forest Health strategy and also implement work on the Water District's lands. And then also the Wildlife Conservation Board grant that we just recently got was really directly related to that partnership and collaboration. And there's other things like the Wildlife Picture Index and the conceptual design that was done for West Peak and other kind of supporting components that have come out of this partnership. But there's been a lot of great work done in the last 10 years, and we're excited to see more work done as we mature this partnership over the next 10 years. So we're hoping that we've kind of covered the approach we've taken to developing that strategic plan. The work plan provides kind of the details of where the focus will be over the next year. And what we're asking the Watershed Committee to do today is to review and refer this item to a future board meeting so that we can sign that MOU and continue with that partnership. So with that, we'll take any questions that you might have about the presentation.
Great. Claire, thank you. Sean, thank you. Board member comments on the OneTam piece. Rajiv.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sean and Claire. I was first exposed to OneTam, I think almost about 2 years ago, prior to joining the board, actually, when I attended a workshop in Mill Valley that presented an update on the state of the health of the mountain. And it was, I was so happy to be there for a couple of reasons. One, just to learn about all the monitoring that's going on Mount Tam. The information that monitoring provides on both the success of efforts around environmental management, as well as the areas where we can still do better. But maybe as importantly for me was the demonstration of coordination between the different agencies that have jurisdiction in this area, as you just mentioned, Sean. My personal work is in international development, all very well-meaning. But one of the biggest challenges that we face actually is the limited coordination between all the different agencies and development partners. We just keep running into each other all the time. That results in a lot of inefficiencies. So for all of those reasons, I find OneTam really encouraging, really inspiring. Claire, it's great to hear that you've gone through a new strategic planning process. You touched on some of the elements that you would like to focus on in the next 5 years, but I'm still curious to hear a little more on what you think could be done better.
I would definitely lift back up that idea of good governance. I think that was something we had a lot of conversations about, that over 10 years, we had a lot of areas where we felt like we could come back together and connect more regularly, where we wanted to be more conscientious of what was our scope and resources, and to have regular touch points where we made sure that we wanted to continue in certain veins of work. So I do definitely lift up good governance. I would say really making sure we had the bandwidth to deliver on the big pieces of the work that we want to deliver on. So the forest resiliency work is definitely a piece of work that we want to have enough bandwidth and creativity to step behind. So really continuing to think about how we strengthen our fundraising strategy. I think that is something where we want to look at some new mechanisms for funding and be creative in how we might bring funds and different types of funds to bear. So continuing to broaden our fundraising opportunities. And then just continuing to connect with a broad range of audiences so that our work is in service to the Marin community and the Mount Tam community at large.
Not easy tasks, but yeah, great. Thanks a lot.
Monty.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for the presentation and for sharing, I think, an important story, which is the goal, the initial goals and objectives of One TAM, what generated the partnership, and then what has been learned over time. I think it's really bold and honest to talk about what initial visions were and then how they've matured over time as you see what you can do with the resources that you've got to be aspirational, but also realistic, so that that blend of inspiring on the ground action is achieved. And I feel like the MOU that we've learned about is a really a great balance, and it really leverages and demonstrates how much has been achieved, but also where there's work left undone and exciting things to be done in the future. One TAM is an incredible model, I think, and one that is a great example that is needed across our, California and frankly, in many places where you have multi-agencies with related objectives, but different objectives, needing to manage a space that can only be managed together if you're going to do it effectively. The fact that botanists from different organizations can, with maybe the inspiration or the direction of the One TAM partnership, be given the mandate to talk to each other, versus only the heads of each of the organizations only getting to have that coordination, but having that coordination going down at multiple levels and across different resource management disciplines is really powerful, because often you only see the leaders all getting into the room and talking and trying to it'd be like having Ben talk about, fisheries management. Not that Ben couldn't be a very articulate spokesperson about it, but like having the fishery biologists talking to other fisheries biologists, that kind of communication, I think, is really important. One of the other topics we're going to be talking about here this morning is recreation management. And I wonder to what extent you think One TAM partnership could, in the years ahead, be a forum to help us understand how to manage visitor experience, frankly, in our watersheds, because not only does wildlife or wildfire cross our boundaries, but so do people and their recreational experience and use of our landscape. And so I wonder to what extent any ideas you might have off the cuff about how One TAM could provide a richer understanding of how to manage visitor experience on watersheds that cross boundaries.
Yeah, I'll start with the answer there, and then Claire can support me. So as part of this process, going through the strategic plan and work plan, one of the key pieces was kind of refining what we said we were going to do. When One TAM kind of started, it became the One TAM can do everything. And that really went across agencies, and it overwhelmed what we could actually implement in any given year. And you even saw that within our project list. For our capital projects, Roy's Redwood was identified today in this presentation, but there's a whole list of other projects. And there just really wasn't the bandwidth across the agencies to carry those projects out or actually complete them all. So we've refined that list and scaled that down. And that kind of an example of what we were trying to do in the last couple of years was develop a trails program for doing trail maintenance and supporting all the agencies doing that. And it really became kind of beyond the capacity of the Conservancy to do that land management piece. So I think one thing we have to understand is that the agencies are responsible for the land management piece, and where the Conservancy brings that lift is in kind of education, engagement, communication, and developing kind of experiences for folks to come to the mountain. And so that's where the visitor experience will have an opportunity to be in kind of that outreach engagement component, likely. And that's what this work plan and strategic plan is kind of developed to support. So I think we need to kind of consider that in terms of that partnership of like where the district's responsibilities lie, and then where we can have that support in terms of engaging the community. And I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Only that, we have some great examples to draw from. I would echo Sean that we want to be really thoughtful in which ideas we bring to bear and put resources to, but clearly within our partnership with state parks and then what became One TAM, we rolled out a comprehensive signage plan that mimics so that the national parks and state park signs looked the same. If you were a visitor, you could find the same sign, you could understand the regulations, you had much better wayfinding, much better engagement. We created trailhead panels together. So I think there's small scale ways that we've done that, and then larger scale ways through joint trails and projects, et cetera, that we could look at that. It would just need to kind of trickle through that development and adoption policy to make sure that we feel like it's going to have the right impact.
Great. I think that is an ongoing conversation for us because our visitors are only increasing, and the need to manage them well and provide a great experience for the watershed that we want people to enjoy, understand, and protect becomes increasingly important. So thank you.
Jed.
Thank you for the presentation. I think I can speak for all of us that at Marin Water, we're proud sponsors of One TAM from its beginning, and our forest health partnership and strategy and set of regional relationships to be good stewards for this land. This habitat and protected and endangered species like the coho salmon and the foothill yellow-legged frog and the best spotted owl habitat in the world, all of which can be assured that they have the best possible stewards and sponsors here at Marin Water. The environmental advocates that we have here in the room, some leaders in protecting our critical, beautiful corner of the world that we call Marin. We're here to stand up, and yes, we have some recreation plans and other ideas that we're bringing forward, but everyone can be assured that we will continue to be the best possible leaders, as we have proven in this regard. So thank you so much for doing it. I'm very supportive of this continued partnership and hope we can expand it.
Larry, any comments?
Yeah, just two or a few. It's nice to see our work from 10 years ago has come to fruition, and I'm glad to see that things are going well. With that, thank you.
Alrighty, I'm going to count that as one, Larry. That too, but again, thank you for the presentation, and I wish you guys would have put the last slide in the deck, because that one to me tells a good story about what One TAM is doing with the One TAM van and the volunteers in front of it, because I think that really sums up a lot of the partnership about actually putting resources out into our lands so that people can have an informative experience and actually learn what's going on and engage, and especially, which is important for me, the younger generation of Marin County residents and our visitors, because I feel like there's going to be a gap in the stewardship possibilities if we don't continue to educate the folks that are coming up that are just new to this area or just learning about how special our lands are for that. But our success in our watershed is going to be measured through collaboration. And I think the more we collaborate, the more successful we're going to be. So continuing this process is incredibly important. And I can't be more appreciative about the forest health project that came out. That document really is worth its weight in gold. And we're going to be leveraging it like crazy. And it was a really good benefit for the district to see that, not only the district, but the surrounding lands too. You know, you talk about the collaboration piece, and I'll go back to Saturday's broom pool event on Bald Hill. We started in open space land and worked our way into watershed land quickly at the benefit of both, or mutual benefit of both landowning agencies. So we see successes even at the micro scale for that. I am very much in support of the focused approach for this. You know, the first 10 years, get out of the barn, and now understanding where we can and can't put our money and focusing on that, and really understanding what we can bring to fruition will be important too. So very excited about the next decade, really excited about the 5-year work plan. And again, thank you for that. So with that, public comment, Terry.
Yes, we have two. Sorry, trying to do the timer here. We have two speakers, Laura Cheriton and Barbara Salzman. Ms. Cheriton, please.
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Sorry, hold. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate Jed Smith's comments about biodiversity. For the gateway communities that are critical to bringing people into the One TAM area, me personally have not felt that there's been much outreach or concern about the impacts that it's having on our lives at bringing people into the One TAM area and the MMWD watershed and the state parks. And we've been significantly impacted in our ability to be in our communities on weekends, as well as leaving and coming back. The wait times are incredible. The danger from mountain bikes and I'm sorry, regular bikes and mountain bikes on steep, already congested roads is significant, and it's just increasing. And so part of that may be something that can be addressed here, but I think it's 5 different groups and jurisdictions and agencies under the one TAM have not reached out to our community, which is Muir Woods Park, and we have, like I said, been impacted. So that's one thing. Also, is there a citizens oversight of the operations of one TAM? And if there is, where would that information be? When Larry Bragman was on the board, I was his representative to that, and I never received any information. So thank you for those.
Thank you. And then we'll have Barbara Salzman. Then after Ms. Salzman is Ms. Nona Dennis. Go ahead, Ms. Salzman.
Just wanted to ask a question. I think it sounds like the one TAM is doing great work, and but I'm still concerned about the place of wildlife in here. I've been asking these questions for a long time, and I was actually part of the group that met to establish one TAM before it existed, had a plan to do that. So I'd like to know from Claire, and hi Claire, how you're planning to do that, because it seems like a big gap in your forest health plan. So I hope you're making some plans to get information on wildlife.
Thank you, Ms. Salzman. Next, Ms. Nona Dennis.
Hi, I had forgotten this item was going to be on the agenda. My first comment is that this is a phenomenon. One TAM far exceeds anything that we could have expected when we first started having, which we say, tea with Sharon Farrell. In fact, we started before that, when the Water District was first asking, what can we do to help fund what we need to do to the watershed? So we've been in on it from the very beginning, and I have 4 comments here to make about it. The things we insisted on early on as a kind of an outside public observer from Marine Conservation League were how it would be funded. Second, how it would be transparent and accountable, because this is not an agency. It is not a lead agency. It is a collaboration of 4 agencies, each of whom has a separate accountability, environmental responsibility, and needs to be transparent about how it participates in this. So this has not become a National Parks Conservancy driven, which has been enormously clear. I mean, I have worked together on a number of projects. So it is not it's not an outside agency. It has accountability, and you as a collaborating agency carry that accountability. Let's see, there were 3 points. The first one, funding. If I have a concern, one TAM has become what I call one of the high rollers as they pursue their philanthropic approach. We're concerned at the beginning with the prospect of another competitor for people's discretionary donor dollars. We, Marine Conservation League, other nonprofits, small, said, well, we're going to support this, but mind you, it is going to be a competitor for membership for our discretionary dollars. So keep that in mind. As we've watched it now turn into its 10 years, it has joined the philanthropic, the big players of philanthropy. And I would like to remind Claire, take this back, please, that we don't want to forget the small grassroots people who really support and need to be considered in the importance. The small donors, those members really need to have attention paid to them. The transparency is one in which we expect to hear the public in a regular way reporting from one TAM, and it's become more and more difficult for them to kind of release the time, take the time to have sort of the annual check-ins, check-outs. What are we doing? How is our plan working?
Thanks, Ms. Dennis.
Finally, they've never included recreation as a stressor, an ecological stressor, and this, in our view, continues to be a kind of a sore point.
Thanks, Ms. Dennis. We have one more speaker. Mr. Tom Boss.
Yeah, good evening. I just wanted to voice enthusiastic support for One TAM. I've had some very great experiences with the collaborative, including a number of public workshops on wildlife and the health of the Mount Tam. I encourage people to visit their website where there's an abundance of information on both wildlife and the plants and all the folks that are using Mount Tam. So yeah, I'm very happy that we continue to support this great institution, and we need this with 5 different land managers. It's great to have one entity that kind of brings collaboration where it's possible. So thanks for all your great work.
Thank you, Mr. Boss. There are no further speakers.
Great, thank you. I'll need a motion to review and recommend this to the full board.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Item C, Watershed Recreation Management Plan Feasibility Study. Thanks, Claire.
So the item before you is a review and referral item. So we're going to ask that the Watershed Committee review the draft feasibility study that we've developed and recommend it to be accepted at a future board meeting. So with that, Carl Sanders, our natural resource manager, and I are going to go through a presentation for you, similar to the one that we gave at the last Watershed Committee meeting, but with a little bit more focus on where we go next. So we'll provide just a very brief overview of the planning process, and then talk about the structure of the Watershed Recreation Management Planning Feasibility Study, and then really spend our time on the strategic opportunities and the timeline for those. So I'll pause here for just a moment. The planning process has been fairly robust. It started, and was guided by our board policy that really identifies adaptive management as a key part for us to think about visitors on the watershed, as well as our natural resources and how we manage the two. That led us into our e-bike community advisory committee that we spent about 1.5 years working through the issue and talking about how to address the new use that we were seeing. And then that led to our Watershed Recreation Management Planning Feasibility Study process, which was kicked off with an initial scoping meeting. Then we had 6 public workshops. We had 2 watershed site visits. We had a watershed visitor census survey that we conducted on the watershed, connecting with actual visitors, getting input on how they were experiencing the mountain. We utilized new technology in the form of eco counters, Strava data, streetlight data, all just to understand the patterns of visitation on the mountain. And then we had updates at various watershed committee meetings as that project unfolded, as well as with various stakeholder groups and in the community broadly, to keep people updated on how this was moving forward. The objective of the process was to evaluate current patterns of watershed visitation while collecting community input on current conditions and future desired conditions. We wanted to consider opportunities for continuing to support safe, inclusive access with an emphasis on protecting the watershed's unique biodiversity, habitat, and water quality. The document that we've developed is organized in this is the outline of it. The beginning introduction kind of goes through the background, the goals of the process, and then provides some context to the environmental setting, summarizes some of our biological monitoring. That's supported by an appendix that provides additional resources in terms of the ecological resources on the watershed. We go into the existing policies and regulations, as well as our existing roads and trails network. And then we talk about the summary of our visitor census survey and the input that we received through that process, and compare it to our 2013 survey. And then we summarize the public engagement process, each of the workshops, what was kind of covered in each of those workshops and the input we received. And then we kind of organize these strategic opportunities. Really, there was no shortage of good ideas and thoughts that came through this process. And so we categorize those in the lens of stewardship, visitor outreach, watershed facility plans and policies, and adaptive management. And those strategic opportunities are where we're going to go next and kind of think through the timeline for implementing those. So as I just summarized, these are our opportunities that we identified in the plan and we're presenting. Under the stewardship category, the first one was sustaining habitat restoration programs that we currently offer, and also developing a new volunteer trail opportunity and really supporting that at a high level so that we can help visitors participate in the stewardship of the mountain, whether they want to do that through invasive plant management, supporting our forest restoration work through Douglas fir culling, or doing trail maintenance activities on the watershed. To support that, we realized we need to develop some capacity. And so we see a need to kind of continuously have trainings around trail maintenance activities. And so we spearheaded this last year, and we're doing it again this year to build capacity within our seasonal staff and our ranger trainees to support the volunteer events. And so we're doing technical trainings on what it is to do trail maintenance and how we complete that stewardship activity. And then we see this growing into an opportunity to engage some of our volunteers periodically on an annual basis and really connect with various groups that want to help us steward the mountain. As part of our last item, we talked about the 1TAM offerings that we're developing in the strategic plan, annual work plan. One of the key pieces of that is to how we can connect various communities to the mountain through engagement processes and programs. And so we're really highlighting and elevating that here in the stewardship component as a way that we're getting a lift through that partnership. Wildlife docent programs, we have a number of them, and we see an opportunity to continue to support those and expand those on the mountain. That can happen through our frog docent, turtle docent programs, as well as through our natural resource trainings for our ranger trainees to really bring the knowledge and expertise into that work group as well, because they're the boots on the ground on the daily basis, outreaching and connecting with visitors and giving them more of that natural resource information and experience to interpret that for our visitors is a key piece that we identified here as we further refine and develop that program that the district is supporting. And then one of the key pieces is non-system trails, decommissioning these and really thinking strategically about how this can be tied to our roads and trails plan and our long-term goals with the mountain. We developed a list of trails in our roads and trails plan that was from 2005, and it really exceeded what the district had the capacity to carry out in that time frame. And it really forgot to think about trails are established on the watershed because people are exploring it. We have to think about access as we think about decommissioning, and so trying to pair those things as we move forward. So the strategic opportunity is the timeline. The third column is the implementation timeframe, and so this is what we're saying is not the duration of the activity, but actually how long it's going to take us to get that activity up and running. And so for trail habitat programs, those are currently running. We've been trying to resurrect the trail program. And so that is going to be one of the first things that we kick off with, is continuing to have quarterly events and monthly events for those activities. The trail ambassador training, we launched that last year as a pilot. We're going to do it again here the next month for our onboarding of our ranger or our seasonal watershed aides and ranger trainees. So that's going to be a key piece that we continue to work on and evolve. And we've been partnering with the Santa Cruz Trail Mountain Stewardship to bring the technical expertise to carry out that training. It also is going to be a way that we support our CCC and CC&B crews as they work on the mountain to provide them with more guidance. The stewardship activities, 6 to 18 months as we develop that kind of program through the partnership, will be launched. And then our wildlife docent programs and our watershed ambassador program offerings are continuing, the ones that we have, and we'll be looking at expanding some of the other offerings over the next year. Natural resource interpretation, we see an opportunity to send our ranger trainees to an actual certification course that allows them to develop the skills for outreach. This is really in line with kind of what state parks and national parks do. They have rangers that do enforcement, and they have rangers that do outreach and engagement and interpretation. And that's what we're trying to build that skill set in. And then I'll come back to the social trails as we get into the roads and trails plan specifically. Visitor outreach services, we talked a little bit about signage on the various lands in our last item, and we see a need and a benefit to updating some of the watershed signs. We did this about 8 years ago or so. We started a process of updating some of our directional signage, and now we see a need to improve some of the messaging on our kiosks and refresh that. We have watershed maps, but we don't have real-time kind of GPS-enabled maps. And so we really see this as a service that we can provide to the community, help the rangers with lost hikers, and help people navigate better on the watershed. The interpretation quarterly events is something that our natural resource staff and ranger trainees will be working on through our volunteer program over the next year to launch those and provide opportunities for folks to come and connect with us. You can think about like a forest health site tour or a prescribed fire site tour or history of the mountain or a wildflower walk. These offerings that we can develop and use our technical staff to lead. So here's the timeline for some of those things. Signage is actually a pretty tricky thing. It takes a lot of time and energy to put into developing the messaging. We're going to focus our first signage effort on our Logganese Creek restoration work at Leo T. Cronin and update our kiosk out there to tell the story about the restoration work the district will be advancing over the next year. And then we'll be kind of targeting other locations after that. The Watershed visitor map, we do have a great geodatabase of that resource, but there is some kind of technical development that has to happen to make that online and active. The natural resource interpretive hikes, that's something that we're going to start developing a schedule for, and we'll be pushing that out soon on our website. And then similar self-guided natural resource interpretation tours. We did this for Lake Lagunitas Forestry Site, and we're working on it now for the prescribed burn site up at Rock Springs. So some of the facilities, plans, and policies, we offer a library watershed parking pass program for low-income parking and discounts. We're going to continue and see how we can expand that. Slow zones and updates at strategic locations. This is going to be something that we move forward with and really advance as part of our update to our roads and trails plan and see a real benefit for that. Pilot studies for multi-use trails and bike access and pilot studies for e-bikes I'll come to in the next couple of slides in more detail. And then a roads and trails plan update and review of trail classifications, as well as looking at a zoning framework as part of that to think about how we can better support our projects, protect resources, and think about access collectively. And then our other power-driven mobility device policy, I'll show you the timeline that we've got for that one as well. So over the next 6 months, we'll be looking at how we can expand our library pass program. As we look at our update to our roads and trails plan, we'll be evaluating slow zones. Also, as we think about pilot studies, we'll be thinking about where slow zones might fit into those areas. With the pilot programs, we're saying about 6 to 12 months, and we think that the next couple of months we'll do the development of the framework that'll support those and start developing the compliance to carry those out. The roads and trails management plan is a much larger, bigger piece of the puzzle, and I'll speak to that in a subsequent slide. Accessibility. So we do see a need, broadly across public lands to make sure they're accessible for folks with various disabilities. And so one piece of that is updating our other power-driven mobility device policy. The other part of it is to develop a list of kind of priority projects that we can carry out on the watershed. So we have some kind of low-hanging fruit that we can advance as we move forward. Outdoor visitor amenities, really just taking a look at our watershed and thinking about water fountains, picnic areas, and benches, educational facilities, how we can expand those and where they might fit into the landscape and how we can do that in a kind of a sustainable way. Watershed project zoning, this is another piece I'll come back to in our subsequent slide on the roads and trails plan, but it's something that we developed a framework for. It is pretty specific to projects because we see that's where we're going to be working over the next few years, whether it be a pilot project or a actual trail project. But basically having a framework to guide kind of how we think about biological resources, patterns of visitor use or visitation in that, and how people are moving through the area, and then the abiotic conditions as well, trail conditions and erosion, and making sure that we're protecting water quality. So the pilot program for multi-use trails and bike access for single track experience is really thinking about a visitor experience that we heard a lot about through the planning process, thinking about directional trail sharing techniques, days of the week, strategic connections and loops, single-use trails. And all of these kind of efforts will be designed to gather more information to inform CEQA and the update to our roads and trails plan in the future. We see some real benefits to this in terms of addressing conflict by separating users or giving folks an understanding of how they might encounter another type of user on a trail. We think that there's a lot of opportunities in discrete parts of the watershed. This will not be watershed wide. This will be in very focused areas, and it'll be designed to help us understand how we might be able to use various methods long-term on the watershed. Similarly, for pilot study for e-bike access, this is something that came out of our e-bike community advisory committee and a thought that we had to analyze kind of how e-bikes kind of fit into the landscape of visitors on the watershed and recreation. And so developing a pilot program that can inform CEQA long-term is what we're recommending to move forward with in the next 6 months. Now, the bigger, broader piece of this puzzle, if you will, is really kind of to help us advance the conversations we've been having over the last 3 years plus, and think about updating our 2005 Roads and Trails Plan. And we're using Roads and Trails Plan because that's what it's currently called, but we're thinking that this really is going to be a more focused effort around stewardship, around visitor experience, but also around managing those core assets on the watershed that are our roads and trails. So thinking about what that looks like, reviewing our trail classification system, thinking about if there's a new trail classification system that fits into the equation, and Project Restore, being more thoughtful and strategic about what it is. Project Restore is a great opportunity for us to think about how people move across the landscape, protect resources, and erase social trails. But those social trails are there because people are exploring and using them, primarily hikers, and then they're used by bikers. And so we want to manage that better. It's not just erasing, it's thinking about how people move across this landscape and how we can improve the experience through doing really good trail work. I think one of the struggles that a lot of folks have is that we've cemented conditions on this landscape by forgetting to think about how we can plan for the future use of the watershed. As we see people moving across it in different ways, we need to be thinking about how we can support that use and visitation. So balancing access improvements with Project Restore efforts, and really thinking thoughtfully, kind of like we did in the BIFIP, about a 10-year plan. Like, what can we actually achieve in 10 years, and sketch out a work plan for ourselves, and be thoughtful about that. Watershed Trail Zoning Framework will be the underlying component that supports all of that, really thinking about how we can protect our resources, but also how we can kind of balance our planning activities. And then incorporate modern trail maintenance best management practices. And this is part of the capacity building, is thinking about how we can get our staff trained up to support the kind of projects that we're thinking about here. And this is, from everything from how we maintain our trails and how we think about sustainable alignments on the watershed. A lot of these trails are things that we inherited. They weren't placed on the watershed in the most sustainable way, and there's ways that we can improve conditions by thinking about that. Adaptive management, this is kind of an underpinning piece, just recognizing that the visitor census survey was a great way to collect information about how people are experiencing the watershed and how we can make improvements. Doing that every 10 years. And then there is a tremendous amount of biological monitoring and inventorying that happens on the watershed, as well as on other public lands. All of that is feeding up into the peak health report that OneTAM's supporting. That's a great way for us to think about stewardship and the resources across the landscape here in Marin County. We're going to continue with that biological monitoring and have our staff continue to support the updates to the peak health report, where that's really where that information belongs for a holistic understanding of resources in Marin County. And then expand our roads and trails early detection rapid response. This is really recognizing that as we do pilot programs or change use, that we need to continue to have a focus on invasive plant management so that we don't have another broom kind of outbreak with another species. And so that's a piece of the puzzle as well. And so time frame for that, kind of we're identifying every 10 years, doing an update to the census survey. That seemed to be supported by the one we just updated. That was a 10-year period. And then the early detection rapid response, we're really going to put some focus and attention over the six to 18-month period of how we can expand that, meaning the frequency of surveys and the type of treatments that happen after those surveys. And then as I mentioned, the biological monitoring fits within that peak health report as well. So with that, that's kind of a summary of the timeline that we presented in this feasibility study in that final section. We just wanted to walk through that and see if you had any comments on how we're kind of scheduling it out at this point. And then, as I mentioned, this is a review and referral item, and we are asking that we bring this back to a future board meeting for acceptance of the document to move forward from here. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Sean and Carl, thank you very much. Board member comments. Larry, starting with you this time.
It sounds great, Sean. Keep up the good work.
Great. Jed.
Yeah, thank you, Sean, Carl. Good to see you again, our steward of the stewards, and appreciate working with you. This morning, I reread an article from 1999 in SF Gate that was about the recreation use of marine water land in our spectacular trails that are used by over 2 million people. The issues and the advocacy were the exact same as today in 1999. The only thing that changed in the article were the names that were quoted. There has been no update of our recreation oversight in the last 2 decades. No doubt much has changed. since that last plan was presented and approved. When we started on this board, 3 of us came in and we were highly encouraged by some, or at least I was, to do nothing, to stick with as it is. But you know what? This is not a do nothing board. This is one that went out, reached out to the public and listened. We listened deeply, thoughtfully to our community. We engaged, and you engaged with the leadership of Sean and the Marin Water team, with our all advocates on all sides of this issue. Public forums, listening organization, leadership through listening, analysis, and making the call. The plan that we see here today, I believe, is thoughtful, balanced, and incremental. It is not a radical shift. It is led by stewardship of our critical habitat, our mission to ensure clean, safe, affordable drinking water. It has a set of pilots, and our environmental advocates can be assured that we will follow through on the impact of these decisions on our trails, accessibility, safety, and habitat with the utmost care.
Thank you. Ranjiv.
Jed, I don't want to repeat anything you just said. I couldn't be more aligned. So I think maybe I want to acknowledge, first, Sean, this is such a broad feasibility study, and it's almost unfair that most of the discussion is going to focus on one element, which is bicycle access. And I hope we all appreciate all of what is covered in this plan beyond bicycle access. For example, Project Restore. That is a very compelling vision, and I wish we gave it as much attention as we're going to be giving the bicycle access topic. I want to start by acknowledging all of the public feedback that we've had that you've alluded to, Jed, on this topic of bicycle access, particularly the following concerns: illegal trail riding and poaching, night riding, illegal trail building, trail erosion and compromised water quality, disruption of sensitive environments and the spread of invasive species, excessive speeds that can be dangerous to other trail users. I want everyone to know that I share all of those concerns very strongly. But I only see one option for addressing these concerns, and that is to make bikers part of the solution. No amount of enforcement or punitive measures are going to get us to where we want to be. And I am pretty sure that we all understand the power of incentives that are well applied. I want to go a little further. I actually believe there's a lot of risk in marginalizing the formal groups that represent the interests of the mountain biking and e-biking communities. Honestly, it will only empower those that are less collaborative and less willing to engage. So please know that that's the perspective with which I'm approaching this discussion. I have 2 specific comments, Sean, on the presentation or the feasibility itself. So under strategic opportunity 3, if we could go to slide 12, if you're able to pull that up. Under the third row, pilot study for multi-use and bike access. Consider pilot study. I'm not comfortable with the word consider there. I think we're moving forward with a pilot study. We've already considered and made a decision, is my understanding. So I would suggest we address that. And then evaluate the second item, evaluate an e-bike class 1 pilot program for a limited term period. What does limited term period actually mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. The limited term period is something that we'll have more discussion on in terms of when we bring the framework to you. But what we're saying right now is up to 3 years. But there's flexibility in your thinking around that framework when we bring it forward. So what our intention here is to come back with kind of how that would roll out and have a discussion around if we got it right or if we want to make any adjustments to it before we move forward. And that'll allow us to think about the time frame for it and what the triggers are for moving beyond the pilot study. Does that do you want to answer anything?
I'm wanted to so instead of consider, would it be develop proposal or develop concept that we would bring back to the board? Something like that.
I would say, and Ranjiv, sorry to put in here, but if we're going to be, depending on the board's flavor, I'm in support of moving forward with both pilot studies. So considering or evaluating, I think the consideration for me is in the past, and the evaluation should be considered part of the implementation as we look forward to this.
If I can just speak to this just for a second. I think that that's appropriate here. I mean, this is a feasibility study, but what I think I hear the board saying is that there's a direction to staff to develop this to actually move forward with that work, bring it back for formal approval, just to make sure we're clear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And yeah, again, I just, the word consider, implies maybe still some decision to be made regarding the pilot program that I think would be best to remove. On the data collection, Sean, I know there's, obviously we have to collect data related to the CEQA, but I'd be very interested in our ability to collect data to understand how these pilots are impacting illegal trail use, night riding, illegal trail building. Are we seeing any benefits of these pilots with respect to those, those activities? That's because that is one of the goals that we're trying to address with these pilots, right? So we have to be able to measure that. If I don't know if to what degree we can, but we need to be, that will help us make decisions on whether these pilots have been successful or not. So if we could include, at least an indication that we will attempt to understand the impacts of these pilots on undesirable activities that we're trying to manage.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. We have been thinking a lot about that in terms of the framework that we're going to bring back. So you'll see some elements of that there, and we can further that discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monty.
I'll start off getting the benefit of saying I completely agree with everything that Jed has said and that Ranjiv has said so far. There's a lot to be said here. This endeavor, I think, sought to address a lot of topics, or needed to. If we, as originally envisioned as a recreation management plan, there's a lot of different facets of recreation on our watershed. I want to acknowledge the obvious fact that the issue of bike access on the watershed dominated the conversation, and I think in a way that I think did a disservice to other recreation aspects of our lands, and in some ways, at the same time, speaks to the fact that this is an issue that has been, I'll say, plaguing our district for quite some time, because we have struggled to come up with a way to address it. And I think that the steps that we are proposing here are really important to break the conversation so that we are not, as Jed noted, that we are not repeating the same conversations of 20 years ago, but we are actually taking action to move forward, to learn, understand, and do something to address this issue, to hopefully resolve it in a way where it's not a zero-sum game where there's winners and losers, but how it can be done. And I believe it can be done in a way that actually benefits everybody, including all of our customers who need a watershed that is well managed, with a focus on water supply reliability. I want to say that that this endeavor, I think we all might have had different goals and objectives of what we would see at the end of it. I think that where we have ended up is a really meaningful step forward with a feasibility study, but this is not a recreation management plan. And I just want to acknowledge that fact. And I think that is something that we still need. I do believe that that while we're seeing that this will be fed into our road and trails plan, I'm not comfortable yet that we're going to adequately do the right service for both of those needs. I believe that we need a roads and trails plan update, no doubt. But I do think we also need a plan that addresses, and I'm going to call it visitor access or visitor management. I don't think recreation is the right term because because there's as somebody who's bird watching, are they recreating or are they having a visitor experience that's about nature? I think the term recreation actually troubles some people. But everybody who comes to the watershed, unless they're a plant or an animal that's native to the area, they're a visitor. And in that way, I think we all should recognize that we are visitors to this landscape, and that if we address the visitors' needs, that we do that in a way that recognizes everybody with equity and inclusion, which I think is extremely important, that we'll end up with a better outcome. So what I would like to see going forward is that we actually recognize this as a really important step. I'm supportive of this as a really meaningful, important step. But I think looking just even at the feasibility, at the opportunities, Sean, that you laid out, they're great. There's a lot there, but I think already Ranjiv has identified language that's vague, that isn't that lacks this kind of specificity that I think I'd like to see, and I bet that others in the community that want to really understand this might need to understand, what does it mean when we're actually saying we're going to do these things? So I would like to see us actually see this as an initial step in creating a visitor management plan that's maybe a part of a roads and trails plan. Maybe it's a separate thing, but it actually takes those opportunities and actually spells them out. And I think we need to recognize that we need to create something that's durable for time. Do we envision this guidance as something that's going to last us? Your timeframes are up to 3 years. I don't know if we want to, in terms of the opportunities that you've got listed, I think the largest one that goes out in time is like 3 years.
Can I just clarify that? That's the timeline to start the initiative.
Okay.
That is not the timeline of the duration of it.
I guess maybe where I'm going is we have a 5-year strategic plan. We have a time-bound set of goals and objectives for what we as a district will do. I think that we need, I believe in time-bound goals and objectives for anything we're saying we're going to do. So I'd like to see a visitor management plan that actually says that for the next 5 years, our vision is this, our goals are this, our objectives are this, and here is what we think we can do over time. Because then we can be inspired. We can make sure that the right resources are there to do it. The board knows what it's signing up for and what it's agreeing to support. And we can then also track and support progress. So I think that this is a great step. I don't mean to be critical. This was a big undertaking. And I think that it's a really important step forward, but I want to make sure that we got down the field, to use a football analogy, where I think we're on the 30-yard line, but I want to make sure we get across the goal with what we need from this endeavor. So,
yeah, I'll just note, I think we're in alignment, and if we didn't communicate that quite as clearly as we could have, I'll apologize for that piece. But the intention is that whatever the update to our roads and trails document becomes that kind of core central programmatic document. It can change in terms of title, but it's for our vision right now is that it would be for a 10-year time period, and that we develop the work plan to support that. And to your point, it would include all of these kind of elements that we're building out through this feasibility study process, which is, input that we received and designed around that input and trying to address that in the near term.
Well, that's encouraging, and I'm supportive of that. Do we have a time frame for? I mean, in some ways, I feel like we've created momentum. There's conversations in our community that have been long. Some conversations have been very long standing, but there's momentum right now. I'd hate to see us lose that connection and communication and momentum that we have because of what has all the conversations that have occurred for the feasibility study, and to keep that moving forward. So can you speak to what you see as a potential timeline? I know this is something you probably have to come back with a more definitive plan, but how do you see the timeline of the roads and trails and visitor management plan?
Yeah.
Moving forward.
What we identified in here is 12 to 36 months being that duration of time that it takes us to do that planning process. So what that means is that over the next 6 months, we're going to be developing an RFP if this is, adopted as an accepted plan, to bring on a consultant to start helping us with that next planning phase, to scope that to include our CEQA analysis to support whatever projects come out of it, and start developing all the elements through a public process and engagement with the Watershed Committee moving forward. Right, this process took us about 1.5 years. So that's probably similar to what it would take us to do another update to the roads and trails plan, whatever it is. It's doing the planning and then it's doing the CEQA compliance on the backside.
In parallel with the pilots, because
Yeah,
they're going to
thank you.
inform that process. In parallel.
That's great. I'm encouraged by that. Thank you, Sean.
Right. Sean, Carl, again, I think it needs to be noticed too that this is another competing priority within your division that's consuming a lot of your time. So it's appreciated because it is a big issue for us. It's interesting because we have the opportunity now to move from reactive decision making to proactive decision making with this process. I see a lot of similarities with the water supply assessment we did. We are really hit with a drought that we knew was going to be coming again, and we were forced to do it in a reactive way, which takes a lot longer and potentially puts the community more at risk in terms of their water supply. And I think having a document like the recreation management plan or the road trail management plan or whatever we end up coming up with will allow us to no longer have to be back on our heels when we're making decisions, because this was really drummed up out of the Citizens Advisory Committee for any bike access on the watershed, and through inaction or delay of action, now here we are years later, half a decade later, with a lot of resources trying to make sure that we come up with a plan that we can actually move forward on, where I think we could have had an opportunity to make decisions earlier that would have been more successful or put us in a better place right now for this. And then you throw on a pandemic where people were forced outside. Now we're really scrambling on how to identify support and a facility and logistical capability to make sure that everyone's enjoying the watershed in a responsible way, and mainly that we're not impacting it or overusing it so that we're going to be detrimental to what we have, and we don't want that either. But looking at this plan here, I don't know how much more responsible we could be in terms of moving forward. And I think this is not a revolutionary change. This is not a paradigm shift. What this is a monitoring of an evolution of recreational needs for our community, and making sure as we bring those in, we do so responsibly so that we do not destroy what we have right now currently. And you look at the position we're in, and I do not like where we're at right now with the e-bike piece. We're in a non-enforcement period where we have a ton of activity, and we don't really have a mechanism for which to understand how that activity is impacting our environment, if it is or if it's not. And I think, we look to our neighbors to the south, especially in the headlands, and they're allowing e-bike access for quite some time now. And it's not a complete apples to apples comparison, but I think there's some benefit too. I just throw it out as an example. But moving back to our piece, we now have years of e-bike access on the watershed, and only increasing. And so now we haven't seen any dramatic red flags that would prevent us from even considering a pilot program. So now we have the opportunity to put resources into studying the specific impacts of those activities and finding out, is this okay to move forward on, or is it not okay to move forward on based on what we find out? So, I don't know how more responsible we get looking at it than actually truly monitoring and using science and community equity, so that we can come up with a plan that's somewhat fair to everybody. And I'm very proud of the way we're doing that. And I think we can draw those same parallels to the single track piece on the pilot programs. We're looking at, again, using science, using data to find out what it's going to be with a limited scope. And if that doesn't work, we adaptively manage and we change it. So I'm very much in support of this. Again, thank you for looking at it holistically. And again, we keep hammering on the bike piece, which has been the big public interest, but there's some really interesting opportunities to increase safety on the watershed for all, whether it's through facilities to allow for water or a geo-referenced map so that someone offline can actually get found quickly, and potentially even look to increase cell coverage for the watershed itself. So I think there's some really opportunities coming out of this that allow us to shape what's going to be a better product for us overall. One of the things I just want to make sure, I wasn't sure if the Project Restore category you used aligns with the negative net impact when we decommission trails or look to anything else, because I think that's an important component of this. I think we're seeing success with the county parks. Again, like I said last meeting, that if we're going to be doing anything, we need to see where we're already having an impact and see if we can remove that based on lack of use, whatever the case may be. And I think a big component of that is going to be is decommissioning social trails. We have a massive impact on our environment that we're not able to measure. And that's a big deal too. And so shutting those pathways down so that we could potentially limit access to much more sensitive areas than we understand is a really big thing. And so I very much celebrate and congratulate, or appreciate, maybe that's a better word, the folks from the environmental community that have been in support of shutting down the social trail network as well, because that's where we could potentially see big impact. Or to your point, maybe some of the social trails aren't a big impact and we officially adopt them into our system to allow a safer experience for more people too. So with that, I'm very much looking forward to this coming to the full board for a final approval, and then really watching the rubber meet the road and understanding that I myself, and I don't want to speak for all the board members, are going to be hyper focused on these timelines we're put in place so that to stick to them. So we look to develop these pilot programs sooner than later. And the reason why I'm focusing on the pilot programs is because I don't want this delayed anymore. We don't want this progression to continue over a decade. Let's get these going now so we can find out if what we're doing is responsible or not. If it's not, we shut it down, look for all other alternatives. If it is, then we responsibly incorporate it into our system. So again, thank you very much. And with that, Terry, public comment.
Yes, we have at least 9 speakers. The first 3, Vernon Huffman, Andrew Levine, and Nona Dennis.
Vernon Huffman, Access for Bikes. May I request more time, please? I am representing 3,000. No?
We're not going to limit the 3 minutes
That's
today.
fine. I just wanted to mention that in 1999, Access for Bikes was formed because of this issue, because bikes didn't have equitable access to Mount Tam. And here we are almost 30 years later, or 20 years later, that we're finally addressing it. We're finally discussing something that is near and dear to us and has helped us form an organization of over 3,000 members. And you saw when this meeting occurred in the evening, when our members could actually be off of work, you had over 200 people in the room. And we mentioned bikes are a subject. Well, that night, that was definitely the subject, because we have so many people that feel that they don't have equal access or equitable access of the mountain. But I'm looking forward to going from no to no. When I joined Access for Bikes, it was because of the no bike sign on the mountain. And I had to find a group of support and help the process and help it move along. And over time, I think that we are getting to the no, and that's the KNOW, about what does bike access mean? What is impact of a bike? How can we all get along? We are getting to the no, and I'm very excited about that. I'm also excited to help you. I can bring a team of, when it comes to trail stewardship, referencing Sean's slide and forming these volunteer opportunities, I can bring a minimum of 20 and easily 50 people to a trail work session. But I have to be asked. And I didn't even know about the Bald Hill broom pole, and I've been involved in that in the past, but no one asked. So here we are. We're availing ourselves to you. Please ask, because as we make a more equitable resource, my members will engage and they will come and they will take the financial burden off of the district. And real quick, I wanted to address Monty's point about one TAM and how they can help recreation. Well, we know TAM isn't in a we know MMWD exists in a bubble, and we have other agencies surrounding Mount Tam. And let me point out that all of those agencies, the Marin County Open Space, the California State Parks, the National Park Service, all have adapted to bikes on trails. They all have policies that allow for bikes on trails. The only agency that doesn't and has not yet is MMWD. So in terms of a interagency approach, let's learn from those agencies and let's bring MMWD into the fold and make it equitable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Levine, please.
Sorry, no worries. Hi, so I'm Andrew Levine from Mill Valley. I just wanted to comment. I think Vernon talking about the one TAM, showing how good collaboration can help the mountain, whether it's with different stakeholders or the other agencies on the mountain. after 50 plus years of riding my bike on this mountain, I'm very pleased that I will no longer be a second-class citizen, and I'll be invited to collaborate on those types of activities. And a third of the users on TAM who also might enjoy it on their bicycle are now part of that collaborative process. I think the process has clearly been very comprehensive, and it's being considered and reasoned approaches to how we're going to move forward on this. And it's going to make the mountain better for everybody. Everybody on the mountain will be better. So, and then the last thing, as a little aside, I grew up on this mountain. I've been there 50 plus years. I'm not a visitor, I'm a resident. It's my mountain too, but I'm happy that I finally get to have a say in what happens there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
They say that the Marin Conservation League is anti-bike. And I want to tell you a little story. This coming Saturday, weather pending, the trail partners, which consists of Marin Conservation League, Marin County Bicycle Coalition, and Marin Horse Council, has its first of probably about a dozen and a half outposts scheduled on the Mill Valley Old Railroad grade at the H-line junction. And we'll be there with our Slow and Say Hello that has a corollary, which is put yourself in my shoes to talk to people who are coming up the trail. It's a particularly good time on that trail at that point because there are a lot of mountain cyclists who are coming up slowly. And they stop because there we are, and they're not coming downhill, they're going uphill. So we have a lot of conversations. The next scheduled Slow and Say Hello outpost is going to be at Phoenix Lake, also a point that there you are on district land. At the railroad grade, you're about to enter district land. The opportunity has been going on. We have done this now for roughly 10 years, getting together, learning from each other, understanding each other, but operating probably with a couple of different E's. E for education, E for environment. We share those with MCBC for one. There's one E that we don't share, and that is MCBC expansion. Although when I say we don't share, we don't promote that. MCL does not, Marine Conservation does not promote that one. We would like to promote RE, which is enforcement, which has to be coupled with education. In this case, Slow and Say Hello operates with a handful, maybe a little more than a handful of stalwart people who volunteer their time to be out for just a few hours on Saturday mornings at busy trailheads so that we can talk to people. Cyclists don't often stop because they're on their way through, but often they do. But Mill Valley, this one, they stop, and we have a chance to really converse. So we have learned, we are cooperating. Probably what we're waiting for now is the where in all of the coverage, the verbal coverage that we've had for this plan, we have never heard where, not a single specific example has been offered that would say, hey, it might work here. It won't work on the Matt Davis. It could work here.
Thank you, Ms.
The shoe needs to drop. We need to know where and when before we can speak further.
Mr. Rick Jones, Debbie Raphael, and Jonathan Irwin.
I'm excited. I'm really excited for a couple of reasons. What Sean's done, this thoughtful process, it's long, lengthy, thoughtful process, very inclusive process. I've been to a number of the meetings, both out in the Watershed and then last February. I'm also excited because of the board that we have. I've been on a couple of boards. I was on Access for Bikes board for over 5 years. I think my title was Mature Vision. I'm not sure how to really appreciate what that means, but I'm also on an elected board in Marin County, and I appreciate what you as a board have to deal with. You have to evaluate a lot of different information from different user groups and really sort that out and come to a conclusion. And I've just got, having been on the mountain for decades, I've just got so much faith in you. And I've got so much faith in this process. And the other thing I have is the faith in our user group. I think our user group has really matured. I think back 20, 30 years, and I think we're fractionalized. I think that we weren't always as responsible as we could have been. And now we've got really smart people, everybody's environmentally focused. We're here to help. 2 words of caution as you go through this evaluation process. One, and I may be preaching to the choir, one is to look at precedents. I think Matt may have alluded to that, but if you look around the different districts, you look at Bill's Trail, you look at those trails that are near stables even, Old Springs in Tennessee Valley, Golden Gate Golden Gate stables at the bottom of Diaz. These are trails that come into stables. Green Gulch, another one in GGNRA. Bill's Trail, of course, is in state parks. And then you've got a myriad of trails in Marin County open space. So look at those precedents, see what's worked and how it's worked, and that it has worked. And then second, avoid listening to the noise. I was at a meeting about the Bob Migda Trail years ago, and they were talking about you need to do a study on crash test dummies for when a bike hits a pedestrian. Don't ever open that half-mile trail. People from all over the Bay Area are going to come, and it's going to be a mess, and people are going to get hurt. So your evaluation process is key. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, Debbie Raffel here. I just want to first thank the board and staff. This conversation was so inspirational, frankly, as a believer in democracy, so thoughtful. I'm just incredibly inspired and impressed by all of your remarks and, of course, by the presentation. I'm going to reiterate a couple of things that have been said by you all and some of the comments. One of the advantages of not being first, even though, believe me, I wish we had been faster, is that there's a lot of data out there that can inform the structure of the pilot. And you've said it, we've heard it in the comments. We don't need to really invent a brand new wheel here. So the pilot gets to be informed by studies, by examples of existing trails, and by the one TAM experience. The one thing I will say about pilots is while they can be informed by the broader universe, they are always very local in nature. And the really important experience, or the thing that I think excited me the most about Sean's presentation, was the thinking about how some of the broader goals can be wrapped into the development of the pilot. So, for example, the rapid response to invasive species. Absolutely. Let's look at if we're doing a new trail for mountain bikes, or all of a sudden e-bikes are going to be allowed. Let's take a look because we need to understand what is the difference between a potential consequence and an actual consequence. And that is what a pilot allows us to do, is differentiate. So is there actually an impact? One of you, I can't remember, sorry, which brought it up, the issue of illegal trail use. We've heard from mountain bikers that, hey, you're not giving us any legal options for single track. So that's why we're doing illegal. Well, is that true if we do open up legal? So I do think the combination of benefiting from others and thinking broadly on the information that we can use in this pilot, it makes it very exciting. For me, I've been talking about moving from a whether to a how conversation for 5 or 6 years now. It feels like we're at the how part, and that feels really good. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jonathan Irwin and then Larry Menikis.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Irwin from Access for Bikes. I'm a board member. 5 years ago, I reached out to Access for Bikes and asked how I could help, if I could donate and get involved. The response, I don't think was from Vernon, was we're not taking donations right now. There's nothing we can do. 5 years later, I was at the meeting a few weeks ago and there was over 200 of us there. I think what that represents is a user group that felt disenfranchised and uninvited now feels enfranchised and invited to be part of the conversation. And we're coming out to help the water district roll out this plan and be successful in building a sustainable watershed and a healthy water source for all of us who live here who want that healthy water source. We represent over 3,000 donors, members, and volunteers. Access for Bikes both advocates for trail access as well as stewards over 20 miles of legal mountain bike single track in Marin. Each week, about 30 weeks a year during the build season, Vernon manages a volunteer group of 30 to 50 people who represent youth, old people, young people. Our entire mountain bike community organizes those folks to build sustainable environmental treads on our trails. We build, like I said, 20 miles of trails, and we do over 400 to 500 hours of volunteer hours per year. So that user group is ready to help and be part of the solution. And I think I can appreciate what you said earlier. We're also excited. We feel like we're part of the solution now, and we want to utilize this workforce to help the water district achieve the outcomes that it's trying to achieve. Highly recommend creating measurable key metrics for the pilot program. We'd love to know what those are so that our large user group can help deliver those outcomes for the water district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Larry Menikis.
Good morning. I just want to talk about some clarity in the plan. When we go to slide 13, we're talking about watershed accessibility. And in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll develop a list of priority projects to support visitor access. In the next slide, it's entitled Pilot Programs. And then under that, it says Pilot Study. So a program might suggest that trails are going to be opened up, but a study might suggest that this is going to be studied for the next 6 to 12 months as to when trails may be opened up. I think that's where the fuzziness that I brought up last week exists. Are we talking about opening? And I think you really want to clarify that for the bicycling community in particular, so that there's a realistic set of expectations there, because I'm still not sure that it's clear. And then I want to get back to the equity piece that we keep talking about. And I also want to talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity. And what we're missing here is, what are we doing about underserved communities? And I know that the board really cares about this. And this piece kind of got pushed to the side, because when we're talking about equity now, we're talking about user equity. And I think we got to come back a little bit and talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, and inclusion as well, and how we're going to help bring our underserved communities into the watershed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have several more speakers. Terry Thomas, Rich Peterson, and then Amanda. Go ahead, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you all for your opportunity to comment today. I am representing Marin Conservation League, and you should have a comment letter in your inboxes at this time. We apologize for its late arrival. In brief, our comments are that the feasibility study follows two paths. One path is primarily administrative, covering proposals that are ready to implement, such as stewardship-related activities, interpretive volunteer and education activities, ambassador, visitor service, and outreach. These proposals qualify for CEQA categorical exemptions in general. The other path requires considerable more analysis and environmental review before any physical changes in the watershed and revising policies that support them. All strategic proposals that involve updating the 2005's Roads and Trails Management Plan and revising policies to support these revisions require further analysis and programmatic environmental documentation.
The feasibility study, which does not contain any reference to specific roads or trails, is an excellent start to this update. Information that needs resolution includes updated physical and biological conditions of roads and trails since 2005, and specific proposals for improvements or realignments to roads and trails by location, including pilot projects. How this path develops is of critical interest to MCL. Therefore, the next step for the board after reviewing administrative opportunity actions, we recommend include transitioning into updating the 2005 RTMP and to include a visitor experience section and revising the programmatic EIR. These documents must be drafted and circulated for public comment. The first step could be to develop a visitor experience zoning map that overlays the BFIP sensitivity resources map, as well as including areas for solitude, bird watching, and education. The plan should contain elements that ensure consistency and understandable goals across all your planning documents, especially BFIP and Policy 7. It also should include data to identify metrics for key environmental indicators of impact and describe any protocols for changes over time. Our letter also considers some specific areas of confusing language and ways to clarify that language so that the study makes more sense. And we're hoping that you will consider these clarifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Rich Peterson, and then Amanda.
I'd like to add my thanks to staff and the board for all their hard work, patience, and foresight through this process. And I think you should be congratulated for breaking this cycle that has been mentioned about the conflicts between different user groups on the watershed, and reaching what I hope will be a conclusion that is more equitable for all. I just want to make a simple point about, and this, so I'm currently serving as board president of Marin County Bike Coalition. So obviously cycling is very important to me and to our user group, but more broadly, recreation, the way that people choose to enjoy the watershed is what we're after. You can be a cyclist, you can do anything. And at the risk of starting a semantic argument, I want to make a point about recreation and conservation. So, we talked about a bunch of different E's during this, whether it's equity or education. I want to add one more, which is engagement. And so just a quick anecdote, we hosted a trail day, not on MMWD land, but was on state parks, where we got all the high school mountain bike teams out to do trail work. And the response was overwhelming. And some of these kids, remained very engaged in trail work and stewardship, and became more interested in environmental conservation as a result. So I actually don't think that recreation is a dirty word at all. And whether you call it visitation or recreation, it is a very important component of getting people, especially younger people, involved in conservation measures. And it is not at all, I think, in any direct competition or in any contrast to people's conservation goals. In fact, quite the opposite. So, I'm looking forward to a point at which more people can recreate properly managed on the watershed, and I think that actually will have great benefits to conservation as well. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Amanda, please. And then after Amanda is Bill Keene and Tom Boss.
Great. Thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Peters. I live in Novato. I moved to Marin in 2021, but I'd been coming up here for many years to ride my mountain bike and my road bike, visit beaches, hike in the watershed, visit shops. This is really a unique place, and I feel very privileged to live here. As a resident, I'm compelled to lend my time and voice to these issues that we've been discussing today, mainly bike access, and I am a board member at Access for Bikes. I feel like I came in at the beginning of the best chapter of the story. I really want to thank the directors, today for their understanding, their vision, and commitment to action. To paraphrase Director Cush, restriction and enforcement aren't working. We need to make bikes part of the solution. I feel encouraged by the plan, especially the mention of use specific trails and creating a system that's designed to reflect the actual use of the lands that is currently happening. It's only by embracing bikes in the watershed that all users will feel safe and be able to enjoy it in the way that they wish. And I just want to thank you all. I really commend your commitment to collaborative and inclusive approaches. This community is only growing. I think the last meeting really showed that with all the folks who spoke from just such varying demographics. And part of the strategic pillars of our work at Access for Bikes is to do better and deeper and broader engagement of our community to really get people involved. And you've already heard how we're doing that with Building Trail and how many folks come out for that. But we're also growing that work, especially, building up our Access for Women initiative, as well as engaging youth. So as you've heard, there are many examples of effective bike trail planning, strategies around the state and country. The biking community is well versed in these, and we are here to support you in the coming months and years. So I'm very much looking forward to the rollout of the plan and knowing how I and others can help and participate to inform the data collection needs that others have raised here in comment today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bill Keene. After Mr. Bill Keene is Mr. Tom Boss.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Bill Keene. I'm from Fairfax, California, but I'm currently calling in from Eugene, Oregon, because I feel that this issue is so important about getting this wreck management plan right. I'm a member of the Marine Conservation League and also a member of Access for Bikes. I know that sounds strange, but I actually support the missions of both. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about both of them today. I want to point out that on e-bikes, you mentioned e-bikes being allowed on the Golden Gate National Recreation Area lands. I also want to point out there's an e-bike pilot at China Camp, and there was a survey done at the beginning of the pilot that showed that impacts of bikes and e-bikes were basically the same, and that there was really no issues at China Camp. So I would urge you to ask Maria Mowry for a copy of that survey. So I think it's great that you're going to do an e-bike pilot on the watershed. The second point I want to talk about is hikers. I mentioned this in my comments at the last meeting, but I think this board, I don't know where you do it, whether it's part of the rec management plan or somewhere else. And I'm really surprised and disappointed that Marine Conservation League's members have not mentioned this, but hikers can go everywhere, and you need to put a stop to that. If we're talking about environmental damage and disruption of wildlife, that's how it happens. That's how fragmentation occurs. So I really, really want to urge this board to address that issue. And finally, my son can't be at this meeting, so I'm going to channel something for him. He mentioned to me, he's like, I can't go there, and I really want to mention that us high school bikers have nowhere to ride on the mountain. And my son's a senior, and he says, and please tell them, can you get a bike trail open that I can ride by the time summer vacation comes around? I really want to train and be able to ride a trail in Mount Tam before I go away to college. So I hope that you guys can get something open for the kids for this summer. Let's give them something to do so they're not hanging out watching their iPhone screens and texting and being on TikTok. I'd love to see the kids on the bikes. And to that point, when Access for Bikes does trail days, we have high school kids from the NICA teams out there. I am sure they can be out on the watershed lands doing work, stewardship work on any trails that are open or other trails that need work as well. So I commend this board. Thank you. This is a long time coming. As a lifelong resident of Marin County, I really appreciate the opportunity to be welcome on the watershed lands in whatever form I choose to come, hiking, biking, or running. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Mr. Tom Boss and then Barbara Salzman.
Yeah, Tom Boss with the Marin County Bicycle Coalition, and on behalf of our 11,000 members, donors, and volunteers, I enthusiastically ask you to approve the study and direct staff to advance the strategic opportunities identified in the study. We've been at this for 3 years, 4 if you count the e-bike study. And this all culminated, in my opinion, with a really positive evening event on February 29th. Over 200 people out advocating for access and caring for the mountain. Throughout this process, MCBC and the cycling community has been guided on principles of safety, equity, sustainability. Over and over again, we heard people say that the health of the mountain is paramount. We all want to make sure that this place is here for future generations and the experiences are comparable or better than they are for us today. I think what you have here is something that's measured, intelligent, thoughtful, and I think something we can get done. We promoted coexistence through collaboration throughout this process, and that's actually, we took that from a title of a special issue of the California Fish and Wildlife on Recreation, actually penned by Ashley D'Antonio, who was part of this process. And while I'm thankful for the study and the strategic opportunities, I do wish we had accomplished a bit more, but we'll continue. And with that in mind, I encourage people to continue to collaborate. We need to establish trust and have constructive dialogues around some of the concerns and fears. I think that we had many opportunities to do that, and some of that got done. We did learn a bit from each other, but I want to see more of that happen as we move forward, especially with that update to the Road and Trail Management Plan or Visitor Experience Plan, whatever we end up calling it. Just wanted to quickly point out some examples. We have plenty of things to pull from. We have Marin County Open Space did their Road and Trail Management Plan 10 years ago. And while it had a bit of a bumpy start, lots of progress, lots of win-win outcomes where we're creating new trail experiences, directing people where we want them to be, avoiding sensitive habitat, and also there's always an environmental benefit. The Liberty Gulch that is under construction and will hopefully be open this summer or this year at some point. We and our members contributed many volunteer days, and we can look forward to coming back out and doing some of that decommissioning of the social trail, the web of social trails on the mountain. And as has been mentioned, there's the pilot studies that you can look at both GGNRA and China Camp. Briones over in the East Bay is doing a trail.
Hey, Tom, we're going to have to cut you off. You're over 50. You're just crossed.
Okay.
Thank you
No
very much for
problem.
your comments.
Miss Barbara Salzman, please.
Yeah, I'm Barbara Salzman. I'm representing the Marin Audubon Society. And first of all, I'd like to bring you back again, as I did at the last meeting, to your mission, which is protecting the watershed and protecting our water quality. I live in the watershed. I pay my bills here. You're not a recreation organization. You don't need to feel like you need to provide every kind of, this is what I'm hearing, every kind of recreation for everything that, each individual wants. It's the protection of the watershed that is your responsibility. I have a question that is not clear to me, whether you're going to be considering any different changes to the document. It sounds like, from what I'm hearing today, that this is pretty much it. We wanted to submit a letter. We haven't had a chance to do that yet. I wanted to also mention that there are, even though it has very lot of positive points, the study has some deficiencies. It doesn't deal with enforcement at all. The social trails discussion is protracted. It's complex proposal for addressing it, and it doesn't really. It connects. It recognizes that recreation has impacts on wildlife, but they are not really described. So they will be needed to be addressed in a CEQA document and hopefully as you move along. One also thing that we wanted to bring up, and that is the potential for reducing use on the watershed to protect the resources. That's not included. So given that, I hope you will consider changes that have been brought up today by Terry and that we will bring up in a letter before your next board meeting considering this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Great. Thank you very much. Any final board comments? Okay, I'll just ask Sean, one of the things that came up that would be of interest for me to see is how zoning would look. We've heard zoning a few times from a few different people, not sure exactly if they're talking about the same thing. When we look to identify areas where we could potentially change use, that we'd also look for areas or zone that would include exclusion of use based on the sensitivity of the area and how we can continue to strengthen that part of our watershed. The other part of this is once we are able to actually move this forward and see some progress to a full board vote when that comes to the full board, understanding that to Monty's comments earlier, that we're really going to look at the next direction as we start moving these things in parallels. Where do we want to be at the end of this, whether it's the road and trails management plan, visitor experience plan in there, and how those two can work. So that's going to be a critical component to the long-term sustainability of this too. So I also like to thank the public for their attendance today, both online and in person. It doesn't go unnoticed that people are taking their time out of the day for the second time this year to discuss this very important topic, and the board understands that, and we definitely take everyone's comments into consideration. So with that, we'll move to item number 5. Terry. I'm sorry. We need to we need to review and refer a motion for this.
So I'll make
second.
Yeah, I made the motion to review.
Great. Thank you.
Refer.
And we have a second by Judd. Thank you. Okay. Now Terry, number 5.
Yes, the next Watershed Committee meeting is on Thursday, June 20th.
Great. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.